Welcome to JWL Sports, where we review all the best sports takes from around the country. If this is your first time, please don't forget to subscribe. We are building an amazing community here, and I would absolutely love to see you part of it. We're building something really, really special, and it's honestly going amazingly so far. I read every single comment. So if you think what I'm saying is ridiculous, let me know below. If you think what I'm saying is amazing, also let me know below. Either way, let's get into some discussions, let's get into some fights, but ultimately, let's have some fun. So without further ado, let's get to it. We're with Undisputed, talking about whether or not Lamar Jackson locked up the MVP. It looks like it's going to be Sherman kind of saying no. I haven't watched this clip. I don't know anything about it, but I'm getting the sense that he's going to say no, which is just absurd. So let's see what kind of nonsense he's about to say.
Because the fact of the matter remains the same for me. That didn't move the needle. It was a fantastic performance by Lamar Jackson at a time his team needed it. It was a statement game late in the season in December. You got to give him all the credit in the world. But the 5 touchdowns in this game against the Miami Dolphins, as crazy as it sounds, Skip, are almost as many as he had in the months of both September and November combined. In those months combined, he had 6 touchdowns passing. And so when you look at the full picture, I just don't see it. And again, people argue with me and they're like, man, you're just hating. I don't see how I'm hating. I'm just laying out the facts of the matter. If
you're
he had
not hating.
30
I'll
touchdowns.
be the first to say you're not hating. Go ahead.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's a fantastic. I thought that was an unbelievable game. I thought he played really well against San Francisco. I think he's having a really good season. It's just when he had his MVP season, and it was unanimous, so you got to put an asterisk next to that because it was so outstanding that he was the first unanimous MVP in the history of the league. But he had 36 touchdown passes. Yeah. And then you look at him having 24 this year. He had 1,200 rushing yards. You look at it, he has about 843 or so this year. And so I don't see it as the same in that respect. And people are like, well, he should get MVP because of what? If the numbers aren't there, then there's not much to say. People were like, they were comparing it to the Peyton Manning season of 2008. I mean,
this is why you can't just go by numbers. I get what Richard Sherman is saying. I really do. I get the argument completely. But this is why you can't just go by numbers. You look at the field. Each game calls for its own unique stats in a lot of ways, right? Not every game calls for 5 touchdowns, 120 rushing yards, and, throwing the ball 40 times, like that's not what each game calls for. So you have to really kind of look back at all the games and see how they all unfolded. And you have to realize that when you look at all the games that the Ravens are winning, they're winning because of Lamar Jackson. They are considered to be the best team in the NFL and favored to win the Super Bowl because of Lamar Jackson, okay? If you now take Lamar off of that team, who are the Baltimore Ravens? Can the Baltimore Ravens win the Super Bowl without Lamar Jackson? Yes or no? The answer is an emphatic no. Without a doubt, no ifs, ands, or buts. Now, if you want to say, because I have a feeling he's going to maybe say Brock Purdy is the MVP, or not Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey is the MVP. Christian McCaffrey absolutely has an argument for the MVP. Now, if you take Christian McCaffrey, and in fact, I was kind of saying before that I think Christian McCaffrey is more of the MVP than Brock Purdy. I'm on the record saying that. But with that being said, as also the weeks have gone on by, take Christian McCaffrey off that team. And I even said this in the comments to people. I said you would be better off going into the Super Bowl without Brock Purdy, but having Christian McCaffrey. And a lot of the 49ers fans ripped me for that, saying no, 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 no. And I said Sam Darnold is a good enough quarterback that you would be better off having a full-on healthy, your whole offense ready to go and having Sam Darnold there rather than not having Christian McCaffrey, but having Brock Purdy and everyone else there. So I've said that. With that being said, take Christian McCaffrey off that team. Who are the 49ers? Obviously nowhere near as good, but they're still a really good team. They still have a chance to beat, the Cowboys. They still have a chance to beat the Eagles. They still have a chance to beat Detroit. They would still have a chance to beat the Rams, Tampa Bay. They would still have the chance to absolutely come out of the NFC even without Christian McCaffrey. Would it be harder? Would they struggle? Would their chances of winning go down? Undeniably, but they still can. Indisputably. Now, look at the Ravens. Take Lamar Jackson off of that team. Can the Ravens beat the Chiefs? No. Can the Ravens beat the Bills? No. Can the Ravens beat Miami? Honestly, no. Can the Ravens beat whoever else? I forget who else is going to be, the Jaguars. Maybe they could beat the Jags. I don't know, because the Jags are kind of, who the heck knows what they are right now. So by definition, Lamar Jackson is most valuable. That's literally what the award means. Most valuable player. Now, with that said, that is the problem with the quarterback being so much more important to the team than any other position, because a quarterback matters so much that if why your team is really good runs through your quarterback, and it's because of your quarterback, well, then by definition, that quarterback is the most valuable player. If your most important player is not a quarterback, he's, a defensive lineman, or, whoever it is, or even an offensive lineman, or, running back or a wide receiver, that is who they are. The problem is that that becomes harder to rely on, because the quarterback, this is a weighted average. The quarterback is so crucial, so important, that if you don't have a competent and good enough quarterback, then it doesn't matter. You could have on the defense, you could have, Watt get literally 100 sacks. He could literally get 100 sacks in a season. And if you don't have a good quarterback, then you're probably not going to win the Super Bowl, right? If you just have a terrible quarterback, you're not going to win. That is the weight of how important a quarterback is. And so, that is the problem that we faced with getting, evaluating the MVP. That Lamar Jackson is so important because that offense runs because of him. And without Lamar, then that team would absolutely not be that team. So, that just is the reality.
That season, he had 6 fourth quarter comebacks. He led the league in QBR. There were things that happened late in that year that kind of pushed him over the top, but the stats weren't necessarily there. And again, that was 15 years ago. If I look at the last 20 MVPs of the National Football League, 3 of them being running backs, you had all day Adrian Peterson, who had 2,000 yards. You had LaDainian with 31 total touchdowns. You had Sean Alexander with 28 total touchdowns. But outside of that, it's been quarterbacks. And those quarterbacks, there's only been 3. And 2 of them were co-MVPs in 2003, and that was Steve McNair and Peyton Manning. They had 29 total touchdowns for Steve McNair, 28 for Peyton, and they were co-MVPs. And then you have the 2008 Peyton season where he had 28 total touchdowns. And that's it. Everybody else had above 30 touchdowns. And so if you're going to tell me there was an MVP 20 years ago, they shared it, and then Peyton Manning 15 years ago, out of all the quarterbacks that have won it, and that's it, nobody else has had less than 30 touchdowns in the last decade, in the last 2 decades, then I'm going to say I would assume they would stick to that pattern. So I guess Skip, but he's the betting favorite. So there's a chance he gets it, but I think it will be one of them situations where they have to split it because he has under 30 touchdowns. So they split it like they did in 2003 with.
But the quarterback position has evolved. It's not just about passing touchdowns. It's absurd. Otherwise, then the award should just be whoever has the most passing touchdowns. And that's not what the quarterback position is anymore. That's not the way it works, the way plays are being called. The truth is Lamar Jackson yesterday could have had like 7 touchdowns. I mean, it was because of Lamar's brilliance that got them down into the red zone, but then he handed the ball off. And then that's what led to a touchdown. So like you have to look deeper than just the numbers on the surface. That's why numbers lie all the time. How many times have you watched a team where your quarterback is balling out on a drive, just making one of the most amazing plays ever? Or let's look at it from a different way. A running back. You see the running back is an absolute workhorse, and he rips off for like a 60-yard run, right? He just rips off, and he gets there, and they get to like the 1-2 yard line, and then the QB sneaks it in, or they do like, you know, a little whatever dump off pass, and now the running back doesn't get it, right? The running back rushes for 140 yards on the day, but doesn't get any touchdowns. That happens all the time in the NFL. So you can't just look at stats. That's why you can't just look at stats, because stats are so often misleading in that regard.
Steve McNair and Peyton likely giving it to CMC or Tyreek and Lamar because, I guess that's what they're going to do, because otherwise I just don't understand it.
Okay, just for the record, if you had a vote right here, right now, it would go to
Christian McCaffrey.
Okay, one vote for no split vote. You just give it to Christian.
I'd split it if that's what we had to do. I mean, it's closer than it was before he had 5 touchdowns.
Right. Yeah.
He had 5 touchdowns this week.
Right.
And recency, it counts to a degree, but you also have to put the full scope of the picture. So I have to give him credit for what he did against the San Francisco 49ers in a primetime game with the world watching. Right. Played fantastic. And then what he just did against Miami with the #1 seed on the line, he played his best football and executed. So I do have to factor that in, and his yardage, his rushing, his impact.
And by the way, before you go, Michael, Christian didn't have much of a game at Washington yesterday, but he did tweak I think it was his calf. They said it wasn't a big deal, but I think mid-third quarter, he didn't play much the rest of the way, if at all. I think he didn't go back in at all. So his numbers were...
And the 49ers still won. Okay, now let's take Lamar Jackson off that team. Have Lamar Jackson not play the second half, even though that they were up. What happens to that score? It's not 56-19. I can guarantee you that.
Not huge. He didn't have MVP caliber numbers at Washington, for what that's worth. Okay, go, Mike.
Now, right now, and listen. When I was home the other day, when you guys were on this, it was just a great day. I was sitting home. I enjoyed the conversation.
Richard
when I got
Keyshawn.
to work.
Yep.
Yeah, I got to work. I told Key, I said, it was so funny when Key told Sherman, all right, Sherman, go ice your face now because we beat you up a little bit. And they both started laughing at the end. It was all funny. It was great. I couldn't wait to get a chance to have this discussion. Because I was with Sherman on this, Sherman, because Sherman was talking about this. Sherman said, you guys can't just keep coming up and saying, this is the game to determine the MVP. It's the combination of the whole season. It's not this one game who outduels each other, who outduel each other in this one game, even though we do that. We do that. You know what I mean? I understood what you meant because it was the Brock Purdy's and the Lamar Jacksons, like right there battling. And since they got a chance to be head-to-head, everybody's going to measure them and say, now he's the leader. You know what I mean? But it's the whole season, not just that one game. So I was with you on that, Sherm. Now, and I think they heard you talking about his numbers. They look like they were directing at getting him some passing touchdowns.
I think so.
I think they heard you. Right. I was like, they heard him. They gonna help him. And then right after the game, they all were hollering MVP.
They were.
MVP. Like them 5 touchdowns. Now we can do it, Sherm. We good. So I was like, okay, I see. They saw this too. But I would also add to 2019 when he got that unanimous MVP. Dude, this dude was phenomenal. See, we get caught up in the dynamic, too. We get caught up in that thing that, oh, my God, we never see that. And remember some of the runs he made that season from a quarterback position?
Okay, he's not actually saying anything right now. He should run for president because he just hasn't said it. He's just talked for the last, few minutes and hasn't said anything of actual substance. He just said, things that happened. He hasn't shared any type of opinion yet, so I don't even know what to do with that. I might skip ahead because it's like...
We were saying even Michael Vick didn't make those. You know what I mean? So we said Michael Vick didn't make those kinds of runs. So we got caught up in that. But what we don't get caught up in is the consistency that he's displayed this year.
Okay, here's the point, finally.
For his football team. Those numbers. All 16 games, he's had his team in the lead in the last 2 minutes. The only other time that has happened was those 7 Patriots, and you know what kind of season those 7 Patriots had. So that what we're saying is late in the season, late in the game, when other guys are throwing late touchdowns, garbage touchdowns, sometimes games they are losing touchdowns, Lamar Jackson didn't have to do that because he had managed and mastered his team and that game the earlier on in that game, so he wasn't caught up trying to catch up. So I give him credit for that. That's not something we talk about giving MVPs, but it's certainly something we should be talking about giving MVPs, because if you can keep your team in the league in the last 2 minutes of every game, you're going to win a lot of those games. And obviously, they won 13 of them so far out of the last 16. So they're winning a lot of those games. Right now, with all that we have, and remember, I measure men in distance travel, when we're coming from, these guys didn't even know if they were going to be working together last year. And Lamar Jackson has a whole new offense.
Okay.
I'm just saying, the early stages of...
Well, that's irrelevant, though. I understand, and that adds to just, Lamar's brilliance and excellence, but that has nothing to do with the MVP voting. Just because they weren't sure what was going to happen this season, stuff like that, that has nothing to do with anything. You measure, a player based off of the season at large in each game, not like what was happening in the offseason, what was happening with this, a new coach. Having a new coach doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't. Like, again, you can say, oh my God, this can add to his, Hall of Fame resume, technically, and add to just the way how people feel about him, sure. But when it comes to measuring the MVP and any of these other awards, it's, how is he playing? What's the story? What's going on? It's not, well, this was happening in the offseason, and he has a new head coach, and this is a new system, and this. That has nothing to do with MVP. It just doesn't. So I disagree with that aspect of it, but I do understand what he was saying about, the consistency of Lamar Jackson and how that should be, taken into consideration. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one. Do you think Lamar Jackson has locked up the MVP? Do you think Lamar Jackson is deserving of the MVP? And if not, who do you think it should be? It's definitely not Purdy. We can put that to bed right now. So I guess the real question is do you think Christian McCaffrey should get it, or a dark horse like a Josh Allen? I think Josh Allen is a pretty good dark horse and should be considered. I don't think he's going to get it or be seriously considered, but I think he's done some pretty big magic with that team. And I think it's the same thing. You take Josh Allen off that team, and who are the Bills? The Bills are no one. But I think ultimately when you're trying to figure out, who's the MVP, just take that player off the roster and think about what would they do. Apparently, Lamar Jackson, Vegas, sees him worth like over 11 points. So if Lamar's not playing, then the team, is only going to put up like 17 points. And if Lamar is playing, the team will put up, over 28 points. So that is a big deal. That is a massive deal. Christian McCaffrey is not worth that much technically. Is Christian McCaffrey obviously incredibly valuable? Yes. But again, this is a problem when you're comparing a quarterback to a running back. And, it's also just not the best stats award. It's not even the best player award, right? Because you can make the argument that Lamar Jackson isn't the best player, in this of the season this year. But it's the most valuable player. And this is what LeBron James has talked about over the years for MVP, where he goes, it's not the best player, it's the most valuable player. And that's why, he was pretty much trying to lobby to get an MVP over Steph Curry, who was like lighting the world on fire. And he was just kind of like, well, LeBron's like, well, I'm more valuable, and it's like, maybe true, maybe not, I don't know. So I don't get too lost in these awards personally. I really don't, because again, if people like Acho have a vote, then come on. How what about some of these other people that are voting who don't know anything about anything? So, but again, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one. Please let me know in the comments below. I read them all. So if you think what I'm saying is ridiculous, let me know. If you think what I'm saying is amazing, also let me know. Let's get into some discussions. Let's get into some fights. But ultimately, let's have some fun. And please, please, please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here. I think we can really do something special here, and we are already in the process of doing it. I would absolutely love to have you part of it so we can truly build something special. Thank you so much, and see you next time.